So this is my first YouTube video about things that I'm making. This is PCB I've just got made online, 10 prototypes, very cheap, easyada.com. I'll put a link in the comment of the video. So this is a small sound generator. Can be anything really, because it's a microprocessor based thing using an AT Tiny. So this is a generic board, just a core board. It will have 4 variable resistors, controls, 1 audio output, and a small handful of components. So let's put it together. So do the low-lying stuff first, which is resistors. So there's a 15k goes in there. As I say, this is a prototype board, so in the real one there'll be slightly more space, I think, for the resistors. They're a bit close. So 2 resistors. The bulk of the components are actually to do with making a low pass filter to sort out the output of the Tiny, which is outputs as a PWM signal. So all very exciting, because this is actually the first one I've put together. We shall see how the circuit board holds up. Just realised I haven't got my cutters. Let's worry about that in a bit. So a couple of resistors. Next lowest lying parts are the 2 IC sockets. So this is for the AT Tiny, and this is for an op amp, which is being used to make the low pass filter. Make sure they lie flat. So this is an experiment in all sorts of ways, because I haven't done a YouTube video like this before. I've made videos, I've done recordings of bands that I've been in and put them on YouTube, but not actually talked directly to whatever audience there might be. Also, I've just realised the light isn't very good here. Hope it's alright for the camera. No doubt I'll get comments saying my soldering technique is awful, but you know, usually works alright. So the Tiny has 4 analog channels, ADC. So that's being used to they read the variable values of the pots. It's 470. Again, yeah, it's not ideal capacitors for the or components for the size. This is what I've got lying around in my box of bits. So the active filter is Salon key filter. It's a simple 2-pole device. The first version was done, I did it on strip board, and just used a resistor and capacitor as a low pass filter, which worked okay actually, but I've got a bit more sophisticated on this. So it's all very experimental, because I don't actually know that this is going to work as I want it to, weirdly enough. I just thought it'd be quite nice to have a go at making PCB and making some sound. So that's one side. This resistor here is for an LED, but I'm not bothering with that, because the firmware that I'm going to put into the Tiny doesn't drive the LED. So the idea of this is that this board would mount under under a panel, and then because you can swap the program in the Tiny, you take the Tiny out, you program it, reprogram it to do something different, and then pop it back in. So the components are like this, because you don't really want to take something completely out of the case just to change a chip. I say this is a prototype version, so there's actually a couple of missing components. So I should have decoupling capacitors on the chips, but I don't. There should be a decoupling capacitor between the output of the Tiny and the audio jack, but there isn't, because I forgot to put it on the design. Second revision is going to have that. I realised about 2 hours after I sent the order in that I'd done it wrong. Still, it's one of those things. So these controls are from Thonk, as is the jack socket here. Because I was going for a cheap solution. That's why I've gone for these particular trimmers, because obviously there's no need to buy knobs, and knobs are expensive sometimes. It's not to say you couldn't just put the knobs on. I think you could probably get some that would fit these 6mm shafts. This is just mechanical support, these big connectors, these big pins. Could probably do a better job, but it's well, it is what it is. These ones are more important, the electrical connections. Like I say, it might turn out that this recording hasn't worked at all, and I will have to take still photos instead. But let's touch that one up. There you go. So that's constructed. I'll chop those leads off in a minute. Because it really goes that way. and this is the op amp, which is a low power rail to rail dual op amp. That will go in here. Ordinarily I'd use better quality sockets as well, but I've got some components just lying around, and turns out I don't have decent sockets. So that's an unprogrammed AT Tiny. This is the original, the prototype that I made on strip board. It's got a voltage regulator because I wanted to run it off a 9-volt battery at that point, but I realised that actually I can run it off of like 3 AAAs instead, which is what I've been experimenting with. So I've got battery pack which I can connect up. So just for interest, I should be able to take this chip out of the prototype and attach it. Obviously I haven't applied put power connectors on this board yet. Ideally I'd have a little jumper as a header on this, but for now I think I'm probably going to just solder it directly and see what happens. So I'm just going to go and find my wire cutters and shall return. So went away, found my cutters, and I've trimmed the leads off the board. I also soldered in the battery and a switch, because it's so useful to be able to turn these things off and on again. So there we go, there's two chips, 2 resistors, 2 capacitors, some controls. I'm recording this on a separate device, so hopefully I'll do some mixing later to get a direct sound output. Right, I've clicked record, let's switch it on, let's see if it works. Ah, good. So this, the firmware in the chip is actually designed for a slightly different design. If I turn this too far to the left, it resets the Tiny, but that's because that's how that firmware was set up. It's not really compatible with this board. So this is a wavetable oscillator with 2 pitch controls. So there's let's put it there. So we've got a sine wave, triangle wave, square wave, and a sawtooth, because, well, that's what synthesizers have, right? It also has an intermediate position, so you have sine plus triangle, then triangle, triangle plus square, then square, square plus sawtooth, just a sawtooth, and then you round. That's now a sawtooth plus a sine. So if we go back to the sine wave, it's like a, I guess it's like a hard sync oscillator. So this is kind of a fundamental, and it resets the phase of the second oscillator. So you can hear there's lots of rich harmonics from the clicks where the wavetable is sort of cut off. So let's do that. It does mean you can change the other oscillator here, and you get these nice resonant kind of peaks. Or almost vocal sounds at some point. It sounds a little sort of computer voicey. But yeah, so that's what it does. It sounds quite horrible up there. Sounds good through some guitar effects, delays and reverbs and stuff, but then what doesn't? This left control I haven't touched on yet is I've called it perturbation because I couldn't think of a different word. It randomly switches the wavetable, the wave shape that we're using. So if I turn it all the way, it does it a lot, a bit less, and it does it a little less frequently. That's just to add some sort of texture to things. It can be quite nasty sounding. So I used the prototype on a couple of days ago at a gig, and yeah, it sounds quite nice out of a big PA. Anyway, that's what it does. Click it off, and yeah, I've got some other circuits in the pipeline, so maybe there'll be another one of these. Thanks for watching, listening.